it's never like a destination, it's always continually evolving journey, but like they're on the path. And why? Because they translated talking into action and strategy. And that was a success.
Yeah, you made a really great point about practice and process. Again, with these issues, it's always about autopilot. So how do you ultimately shift those behaviors to other behaviors that are better that are also set on autopilot? And a great example of that is, I work in storytelling, so I really work with people about their beliefs and their buy-in in terms of diversity. If you don't believe that it's important, if your eyes gloss over and you're like, here we go with this buzzword again, you already are failing because you don't really genuinely value it and you're ultimately not going to do the actions necessary to continue it. So I think really assessing the buy-in of it. Do you genuinely believe it will be beneficial, not just for these marginalized or minority groups, but for everyone, and why? So when you have that buy-in, you have the motivation to change the behavior. And then from there, you can set up processes so you can ultimately have accountability and constantly thinking about this through the lens. So I'll give you an example. Someone I'm working with now is a woman who's a solopreneur and she's writing a book. And the book is essentially about increasing people's self-confidence and self-love through all this research and sort of practical, tactical tips about it. So she was concerned that her point of view would exclude certain groups of people because of her experience. So I'm working with her to set up frameworks and strategies so that her point of view can still be shared, but then it can be open and applicable and valuable for other groups. So instead of dictating what their experience is or what they should do based on just her point of view, she's now giving them a toolkit and a framework to work from, and ultimately setting that up has helped her to really assess and constantly keep top of mind, how am I making sure that this perspective and these tips can really be applicable to any group outside of myself. So I think really acting on what are the stories I'm telling about my values, how am I setting up processes and practices that are constantly being checked so I can keep myself accountable, and what are simple, easy ways that you can do that as a culture and an organization, which I can share more, because I think we're going to talk more about this, right?
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I mean, that really leads into the next question, is that it's like an overall shift that has to happen, right? So I guess the question that I want to ask you guys is, what can we do to create that cultural shift?
Okay, I'll start. So really, if you boil this down, there's a lot of information. It's about increasing inclusivity and decreasing bias. And I'll talk first about what leaders can do and what employees can do. So from the leadership side, really being committed to the sponsorship stuff I was talking about is so critical. And I know there's been conversations internally for you guys about what is the growth paths here? Where do I develop in my position? Where do I go? Sponsorship is a big part of that, so leaders having an incentive to set up meetings and coffees and lunches with people outside of their departments, their teams, and also their ranking systems to learn about their employees. And to not just default into the people they're, comfortable with and having just their happy hours and lunches with, but generally people they typically want to talk to. When there's an incentive to do that, you're more likely to curate more talent, and you're also likely to provide a real environment of inclusivity because people feel heard and listened to. The second thing that leaders can do is be open to feedback. Now, feedback is hard. Most people don't want to hear about how they're messing up, essentially. But feedback is really critical and crucial because it creates a culture of trust, which you need to work on any problem. And also people feel heard and they feel like they have some sort of effect on the decisions that are being made. So whether that's anonymous feedback, legal surveys every quarter, where people can feel comfortable going to HR and reporting anonymously, and then leadership actively acting on that feedback. Not just being like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and then it just goes into the ether. That's the worst thing you can do to employees because it's like you wasted their time. So it's important to essentially curate talent outside of yourselves and incentives for that, and also having consistent feedback. Now from the employee side, to increase inclusivity and reduce bias, in the meetings, this is so important. You need to give space and to acknowledge other voices. Now that sounds really simple, but it does not happen. That means when people are talking, let them finish their thoughts. That means not invalidating their opinion as soon as you hear it, because it's a default, and a lot of the time what happens is people who have diverse backgrounds get silenced, which means you're not getting the ideas you need, and also you're not innovating. So one of the things that you can do as a man is if somebody's speaking, especially a woman, and you feel like you need to interject, take a beat and think, did they finish their thought? And in my opinion, to contradict and challenge their thought in a way that doesn't really truly add anything to the conversation. If those two things are happening, we need to stop and be quiet. If they're not, then go ahead and continue and share your thought. If we're women in meetings or anybody who feels like being silenced, like I said before, stop, take a beat, and say, let me finish my thought. Because when you acknowledge it happening in the moment, people can get the behavior, kind of like a muscle, like you're working out, like it hurts, but you don't grow that muscle, and it's going to become an automatic pattern. And the last thing an employee can do to increase inclusivity and reduce bias is to be open to curiosity and difference versus shaming other indifference. So like we were saying with implicit bias, if I walked up to a white dude in this office and was like, your people love polos, don't you? I mean, that's not a great way to start a conversation or learn about somebody. I had an experience with a colleague of mine. We went to the movies, and I love bringing snacks in the movies, which all know it's expensive here. And I was bringing these snacks out, and she goes, what you gonna pull out next, fried chicken? Come on, girl. I mean, just stuff like that, simple assumptions about people. So how you can change that is just being open and curious, so asking open-ended questions like, what did you do this weekend? What do you like to buy? Where's your preference in food? Versus assuming things about people based on what they look like, where their